Believe it or not, we are approaching the end of March now. And so, with that in mind, I wanted to do one of my now fairly regular episodes, which is a review of the quarter and then also a setting us up for the next quarter. So, I'm going to do that in a specific way today. I'm going to break down my system, how I've been doing my planning this quarter, and do a quick review of that. I'm then going to look at some specific goals that I was working towards and how they've gone and just do a little bit of a review of those. I'm going to select a couple of topics to give it that tangibleness. And there are others, but I think it can always be helpful to take real life stuff. And then finally, I'm going to be thinking about how my theme for the quarter, which was organization, how that's gone, and really what kind of a theme I am looking for the next quarter. So, with regards to system, I would say that I am not the most consistent type of person. And so, when I listen to a lot of my planner podcasts, I do marvel at how diligent they are, how much they stick to these systems. It's not easy. It's really impressive that they manage to do this. But I'm speaking as somebody who doesn't always find it that straightforward. I can suddenly just forget to do a process or life can get in the way. And I want to speak from that perspective because I think that can feel quite accessible when you know that this stuff doesn't come naturally to me. And yet I've been able to build up some systems. Hopefully that gives you a sense that it's very doable. And the chances are you're probably even more organized than me. So the things that I talk about, struggling with are probably actually going to be really straightforward for you. But what I hope that does is make it feel really doable to have a good system in place. So the first part of this system is having my notes app. I talked about this at the end of last year. Having either you can call it a second brain or having that dumping ground where every idea or thought or to do that comes into your head, not every thought, but every to do that crosses your path has somewhere to go. And so it doesn't need to float around in your mind. I started that with a new vigor and energy at the end of December, and I have been maintaining that. The way that system has evolved is into a sort of a weekly, monthly thing whereby when it becomes a new month, say March, I just put a new heading which says March, and then I copy it over to a fresh note and I put the word archive to the old one so that all that stuff that's happened doesn't really get lost, but I get that sense of, okay, here's this month's manageable list. And, it does actually look a little bit smaller. So it does look like some of those little things around the edges have been being dealt with. And so there is the satisfaction of watching that to-do list shrink. I still think that I have some sort of a cognitive bias or something like that, where there's some part of my brain that wants that list to be shrunk to zero or something. But I'm pretty sure that will never ever happen. So that's the catch-all. That's one part of the system. That's a running list. It's available on your laptop or your phone. And it just means that you never feel like you have to forget stuff. But for me, the really powerful part about it is sometimes when I'm having a conversation, unfortunately, our local library has shut down recently. And I want to get in touch, for example, with the council about some alternative venues for it because there's some issues with the building. And that's the kind of thing that I'm not sure when I'm going to get around to it, but it's on that list. And I have some faith because of what's been happening over the last few months that I will actually get to that item at some point. So that sort of stuff I feel is more likely to happen now. And that gives me a sense of self-efficacy, which is that sense of personal competence and confidence that the things that matter to me, I will get to, even if I won't get to them immediately. So that's that part of the system. Then I've got my journal, which has this weekly spread. It's very good at prompting you to have a priority for the week, a set of priorities for the month, and then daily priorities as well. The layout is a little bit challenging, and so I'm not always able to stick to the layout, and I end up using the free pages a little bit more. But overall, I'm finding it a very useful prompt. And the more you do it, the more that you sit there and think, okay, what is my priority for this week? Yes, I've got 100 moving parts, and yes, I could happily just operate in a mode of execution and just get those things done. But what areas am I actually trying to move forward on? Oh, I'm not sure. Let me go back to my year-long vision that I set up and the goals that came out of that. And that can just nudge you in the right direction. You get to the end of the week, and as well as managing everything on your plate, which is often just an achievement in itself, you can also feel like you've made progress towards those bigger goals. So that part of the process, that's a written process, that's also going really well. Because I'm not doing the TV in the evenings, I do feel I have a little bit more space in the evenings for that. But really the best time is that I'm waking up earlier again, because again, I'm going to sleep earlier. And so I have some time in the morning with the coffee and the planner. And actually that is a really nice time of day to do some of that daily planning, and also relate it back to the week and the bigger month goals. So that part of the system is also going pretty well. And one thing that I have really kind of nailed now is doing the monthly to-do list, which is just a bit of a celebration of all the things that you do in the course of a month. I talk about this very regularly, so I won't over egg it, but really it's just about sitting there with your calendar, having a look at all the different things you've done and achieved, big and small, and things that make you happy, that you've managed to do. And normally that list really does surprise us in its length. And I think our brain just struggles otherwise to have, computed that we would have been able to do this many things. So it's, I think, really, again, good for building that self-efficacy and giving us that sense that we can do the things that we want to do, we can do hard things, and we can move towards our goals and visions, as well as keeping various plates in the air. So that's my review of the system. In terms of going forward, what I would like to do, I listen to a podcast called Best Laid Plans. She's currently talking about planning spring, and she's suggesting that we actually put aside 2 hours to do that spring plan. So for me moving forward, I think it's very difficult for me to do that type of planning work unless I'm sitting with my husband. I'm going to need, if we're going to get into the nitty gritty and the logistics, then I'm going to have to do that with him. So maybe for me, what it looks like is an hour on my own doing that planning, and then a nice coffee with him doing that same thing. We will have our laptops out and we will get into the detail of things. We will be sending WhatsApp messages to various people that help us make our life run as it does, etc., as we do that planning. So it's quite live. You don't necessarily walk away with a huge to-do list afterwards, because who wants that, right? From a couple planning session. So that's how that part of the process is looking for me. So let's dive into a bit of a Q1 review from my end. So my word of the year was supported, and this is obviously a year-long thing. But really, the main focus of this for me was on the work front and taking on a little team, which at the start of the year, I didn't know how that was going to look, but I can report back that it is going really well. And the fact is, I'm a good team worker. I worked in a team for almost 2 decades. So I really enjoy having this team, and their support is definitely making all of the difference. And it's also feeding into the organization theme of this first quarter, because it's helping get a lot of systems and processes set up and organized in the business. So that I can report is going really well. Onto the theme of organization that was my Q1 theme. I had then broken this down into a few categories. So to touch on some of those, the most important one that I identified was finance. And that's because it was the high leverage one. It was kind of saying time spent on this is going to have the biggest impact. And when I now think about that finance piece, I've, as usual, gone down a bit of a rabbit hole on the financial piece, and as well as running a workshop with a bank on scarcity versus abundance mindset. I have done various pieces. So the way I would structure this is, I would say with finance, there's the overall big vision. And in my vision builder work, the finance piece is 100% there. And it's going to be part of that picture, that 10-year picture obviously having that financial services background, but then also a lot of the people that are coming through the Vision Builder have professional services or financial services backgrounds. So they are wanting to engage on that topic. So obviously we want to start with that vision. What matters to you? What is that stuff that is not somebody else's dreams that they are demonstrating, or that you can see and compare to? What is your personal vision? Then the next layer of that for me is about the mindset. And that's where I think I've really enjoyed doing some of this shift into from scarcity mindset into abundance mindset. And I've been running these workshops around this, getting into some of the research about that. So I will get into all of this in a separate episode. But to me, without that vision, without that mindset, we're going to be, again, scrambling around in the dark when it comes to finances and finance work. Then we're ready to think about strategy. So that's that big picture of how we are then managing our money and finances towards these vision and goals. And then the final layer is the admin. And actually, with financial stuff, a lot of it is admin at the end of the day that you need to set up, get in place, get a system going. And so, a lot of my time in this quarter has been about tending to the admin. Some of it I have given it front of week space because it wasn't getting done otherwise. And with that compassionate mindset of saying, if something's not getting done, it's hard. And so I'm going to give it the appropriate scaffolding. I've been able to bust through some of the stuff that was been on that list and wasn't getting ticked off. And then once that's a bit more manageable, sometimes I've been doing it first thing. What with my changes in screen usage, I've been able to go to bed earlier, wake up earlier, and use some of that time for that financial admin. So I would say, for me, from a review perspective, it's all ticking along. And I have some plans for the next quarter because we will then be in a new tax year that I want to do, including getting on top of tax returns a lot earlier. So that one, I'm really pleased that I had put it where I put it, because I've been working on it on all of these dimensions, at the vision level, at the mindset level, at the strategy level, and at the admin level. The other one I wanted to touch on is the wardrobe goal. And here again, just like with finances, I have tapped into really good content on this topic. This is a topic I've followed, by the way, the finance stuff for a long time, whether it's FIRE, Financial Independence Retire Early movement, or the other mindset pieces. I've followed this along for a while, but I've found some really good resources on this topic. So I will share about that in a separate episode. But jumping back into the wardrobe, I also started that, as any coach or podcaster might, by first finding myself some good podcasts to listen to on the subject of wardrobes and building capsule wardrobes. And I studied some creators who specialize in the idea of creating a capsule wardrobe, because my aim with the wardrobe is really that organization piece. It's saying, how can I get out of the door more easily, and how can I find it really joyful to get ready for my actual life? The one where I have to show up at a school event and it's casual, but it's not that casual, or I have to meet somebody for coffee. And again, it's in that gray area of like not super smart and not super casual. So finding out what that gray area looks like in my life, and then having the right stuff that's appropriate for that. The approach I've really been taking here, once I had done a few style quizzes, figured out where I was maybe going wrong, has been asking myself this question of, what is the high leverage thing that you need to do when it comes to your wardrobe? So I'm not rushing out to go and buy an entirely new wardrobe. It's much more about item by item, month by month, saying, what is that one item that if I have it, it will make the most difference to my ability to easily get dressed for my actual life, feel good in it, and then utilize what's already there. So wake up all those dormant items in the wardrobe. So for example, a pair of white jeans. I'm not going to be able to keep a pair of white jeans white for very long. So I've gotten through at least a good pair of white jeans in the past. But what I've resigned myself to is that when I have a pair of white jeans in my wardrobe, it basically allows me to wear every single other one of my tops, and they otherwise go a bit dormant the rest of the time because it just can look a little bit dull. I have a few darker tops, and so they need a little bit of elevating and illuminating with some white jeans. But these sorts of things are not exactly the most fun things to buy. Like, jean shopping isn't my idea of well, I've, until now, jean shopping hasn't been my idea of fun. I've sort of broken that mindset a little bit this quarter, and I've actually enjoyed the process a bit more. I've lent into, for example, on my day off, that process, but also, for example, when I went my mum for Mother's Day, we went for coffee and then we went around the shops a bit. So just, leaning into it as an activity that can be quite relaxed, quite a moochy activity in a social setting, and just having the headspace for, in some downtime, doing a little bit of online perusal and all of that. And I do want to emphasize that I have the headspace now, because that headspace was maybe last year or the year before still being occupied by house stuff, before that probably by masters. And so it happens to work right now, in my current season of life. And so I think it's always worth considering what that season is, for you, when you're trying to maybe incorporate a new habit, process, or make a bit of a change or transformation. So I would say that is going. I've had those moments that I was looking for, which is like, yeah, I feel good in this. It was really easy, and like I feel more me. And that's what I'm looking for. And I would say that I have, sometimes, weeks and weeks will go by and I'll think, oh God, I haven't done anything on that goal. And the beauty of a whole quarter, which is, like 90-ish plus days, is that you can have weeks where it's nowhere near your to-do list. But when you do that monthly review, you can just set a couple of things and then they just happen to get done over the course of your next 30 days or 29 days. So that is really my review. So those are two areas that I just wanted to give a little bit of detail on, do that bit of Q1 review for, and hopefully inspire you to do similar. These were really tied to my year-long goals. And I guess we're close enough to the start of the year where the goals that we might have set at the start of the year still feel relevant. They still feel valid. They haven't necessarily needed to pivot yet. So I actually took a little pause before I pressed re-record on this end segment, and I thought I was going to be sharing the Q2 planning section. But what I realized was that it actually took me a little bit of time to then go away and make my own Q2 plans. And I didn't want to overpack this episode full of things. I'd much rather that you guys walk away with some really clear ideas of how you might do your own Q1 review, and then come back in a separate episode when we can think about Q2 planning. So I'm going to leave it there and be back with you next time talking through Q2 planning. Look forward to connecting with you next time. Bye bye.